I can't really stress enough how imperative it is that you really understand parts of speech, not only parts of speech, but also parts of a sentence, also punctuation. When you master this, you will never, when you master this, and this isn't, it's not highly advanced, it's actually pretty simple. But when you master it, it becomes so much, not just in your SAT writing, in any type of writing, probably besides creative writing, you'll want to be cognizant of this. So these definitions, I like to use Quizlet a lot. It's a flashcard application. So basically, you see adjectives, they only modify nouns. I think that's something I memorized. So adjectives, you would think of, actually, how about, and some of this might seem a little bit below your level, but I'm reviewing it just because I think it's really important to even, I think, have, we talked about the foundational knowledge. I think it's important to make sure we have an understanding of the foundational knowledge and of the foundational aspects of the English language before we actually begin writing. So foundational, so common SAT writing topics. Okay, so how about Sophia? When you think about adjectives, and how would you describe, so I have, you see adjectives modify nouns. How about 3 examples or different ways in which adjectives modify nouns? Okay, so the question is, state 3 ways in which adjectives, or I should say give 3 examples in which adjectives modify nouns. So more so, so think about, so one example I can give is sparkly, cognizant, person. Oops, to everyone. Cognizant person, or cognizant individual. That's actually, okay, yeah, that would actually be a compound adjective, but pretty good still. Fast runner. Yep, very good, Garmin. And one more. Tart apple. Very good, Sophia. Very good, very good. Exactly. So those are adjectives that modify nouns. Okay, actually, let's not spend, yeah, actually I'm thinking this is kind of, maybe going over this like this might be a little bit too, I don't want to take too much time from actually taking, doing coursework in this way. So, okay, how about this? Adverbs. So adverbs are basically, you can think of adverbs as modifying another adjective, verb, or adverb. So you can think of, so basically adverbs are never going to modify nouns. So when you look at a sentence, if it asks you a mechanics question and you see an adverb in front of a noun, you'll know that that's an incorrect answer. For example, you could never, in the English language, slowly egg, for example. That's not something that's grammatically correct. But if you had slowly in front of a verb, slowly walking, things like that would make more sense. Conjunctions are very important. They're going to connect two parts of a sentence together. We have coordinating, which are always going to connect two independent clauses. So you can think, I am walking to the store. Well, actually, I will ask David, tell me what an independent clause is. Exactly. Yep, it can stand alone as a sentence. So it's going to have a subject and a verb, and it can stand alone as a sentence. It represents a complete thought. So I give this example. Rhetorical questions are questions without a clear answer. That's an independent clause because it has a subject and a verb, and it can stand alone as a sentence because it represents a complete thought. And then we don't really need more information for this sentence to make sense because it has a subject and a verb, and it represents a complete thought. Dependent clauses, dependent clause. So this is going to be, it's going to have a subject and a verb, but it cannot stand alone as a sentence because it does not represent a complete thought. Usually there is a subordinating conjunction in front of it. So after I gave the sentence here, after we waited for the bowling alley to open, finally got the ball rolling. Aha. I put a pun there. I thought it was kind of funny. So that's, yeah, that's how that's a dependent clause. Okay, So also subordinating conjunctions, they're going to be introducing these dependent clauses, these phrases that cannot actually stand alone as a sentence. So after would be an after, even though, rather than, whether, after we walked to the store, I might say after Jimmy Carter was president, Ronald Reagan, something simple like this could definitely, I think, work. And I think that's basically, yeah, that's a dependent clause. And then we have correlative clauses. So correlative, okay, so those are subordinating. Coordinating are going to connect two independent clauses. And remember, two independent clauses are two sentences that can stand alone or stand by themselves in a sentence. So this is the easiest way to remember these. These are going to be through the mnemonic fanboys: for, and, nor, but, or, yet, so. So for example, I mastered the SAT writing section, but I am still having trouble with the math section. So this is have two independent clauses connected by a coordinating conjunction. The coordinating conjunction here you see is but. But I am still having trouble with the math section. I think that's the correct one. And then let's see. Okay, the other type of conjunction that we want to learn about or talk about is correlative conjunctions. So these are going to modify two subjects in a sentence. So both Jennifer and John at a nonprofit organization that strives to improve voter turnout rates among young Americans in primary elections. So that would be correlative. So we see both is modifying Jennifer and John, and we see and modifying both, my apologies. We see both modifying Jennifer, and we see and modifying John. So that's basically how I do that. And then let's move on. Yeah, that's. I think it's fairly simple. It's more so just important to make sure that the foundational knowledge that you have is really mastered. I think sometimes we forget as we get older how important it is to actually have a strong understanding of these. These are foundational grammar topics, but sometimes people forget about them. But does anybody have any questions about this so far, this handout? And you all should have it. If you don't have it, let me know. I'll definitely email it to you. No problem with that. we can move on to common SAT writing punctuation. Okay. Okay. So let's move on to punctuation. So semicolon, we talked about two independent clauses, two clauses that can stand alone as a sentence, and they both represent a complete thought, and they both have to logically precede each other. So this is, a semicolon is going to be useful in this example here. A coming of age story is when a young protagonist is first introduced to adulthood. So that's an independent clause. We see a subject, story, young protagonist is first introduced to adulthood. That's a complete thought. And then we insert the semicolon, and then we have Harper Lee's To Kill a Mockingbird is an example of this. That's also an independent clause. We have the subject, Harper Lee's To Kill a Mockingbird, and then is going to be our verb. So this is going to be an independent clause as well, and we have the semicolon separating both of them. Okay, does that make sense? I'll give a minute for students if that doesn't make sense, and then we'll move on. When is it better to use a good question. So usually I would say, especially when one clause logically precedes the other. So if I kind of was in this random stream of consciousness where I said, today I ate bagel and cream cheese. And then I said, I went to look at my teaching schedule or calendar, let's say, calendar. So I think this would not be, a semicolon wouldn't really work here because we don't have, this doesn't really logically precede this one because it's talking about two completely different things. But it would make sense if I said, Sigmund Freud believed dreams are the royal road to the unconscious. He is the founder of psychoanalytic psychology, a relatively new, semi-outdated this logically, if Sigmund Freud believes dreams are the royal road to the unconscious, that is something that I think logically precedes. He is the founder of psychoanalytic psychology, a semi-outdated field. That makes the most sense. That's when I would say a semicolon is much better to use than a period. And I think definitely also I think some students are afraid to use semicolons, or I think a lot of that fear comes from really not knowing when to use them. But it's really, once you have the independent clause, you know what the independent clause is. You know that the independent clause is going to have a subject and a verb, and it can stand alone, as a sense, stand alone. as a sentence because it represents a complete thought. When you know that, then you know that another independent clause could be Joseph Stalin was born, I believe, 1927. He ruled the former Soviet Union. New Zealand. Yeah. I would say something along these lines. Does that make sense? Michael, fantastic question. Really good question. Is a semicolon like a softer period? Yeah, definitely, Garmin. A semicolon is definitely like a softer period. It's, yeah, a period is a harder separation, exactly. So in this example, I had these two kind of, me eating a bagel and cream cheese ran completely separate from then going to look at my teaching calendar. Two separate activities. So I use this period. Using a semicolon here, grammatically it would be correct because I'm using two independent clauses and I'm separating them. So that is correct grammatically. But from a usage standpoint, I think it doesn't make that much sense to use a semicolon. A semicolon would be better. In this example here, Sigmund Freud believed dreams are the royal road to the unconscious. He's the founder of psychoanalytic psychology, a semi-outdated field. They're somewhat related, and so yeah, it's like a softer period. Exactly. Good? Okay, very good. So let's move on to the use of the colon. So the colon links an independent clause with another independent clause, dependent clause, phrase, or word. What comes after a colon is emphasized more greatly than what comes before it. So I might say irony is used by writers to create a set of circumstances that occur in a way the reader would not expect. Their goal is to keep the reader engaged. So this sentence, it's moving forward, but we also have their goal is to keep the reader engaged. That part of the sentence is emphasized more greatly than what comes before it. So it makes much more sense to use a semicolon here, to use a colon here rather than a semicolon, because we have irony is used by writers